After Captain Ibrahim Traoré surviving multiple failed assassination attempts and coup plots, now this young revolutionary leader is facing a new wave of criticism orchestrated from the streets of France, the very nation he has boldly challenged to relinquish its colonial grip on Africa. A few days ago, a small group of Burkinabe citizens took to the streets of Paris, waving placards and chanting slogans, demanding that Traoré step down, branding him a dictator, and calling for a so-called democratic government. But let's pause and ask, who are these voices, and why have they chosen the soil of a former colonial master to air their grievances? Why not stand in Ouagadougou, where Traoré himself has declared the streets open for protest, even against his own leadership? This is not just a story of dissent. It's a chapter in the long, painful history of Africa's fight for true sovereignty, a history that keeps repeating itself, yet one that Traoré is rewriting with unmatched courage and vision. In a heartfelt speech just days ago, Captain Traoré bared his soul to the people of Burkina Faso, a speech so raw and powerful it left many in tears, resonating across the continent. With unwavering conviction, he declared,
"Our only crime perhaps is trying to revolutionize our healthcare system, for example, to equip our hospitals, to build modern hospitals. Maybe our crime was wanting to revolutionize our educational system, to build schools up to standards, to change our curricula. Our crime might be having allowed our farmers to have cheaper fertilizer, to plow their fields for free so that we can achieve food self-sufficiency. Or our crime might be wanting to build road and rail infrastructures so that our people can move around. In short, everything we try to do, I think some have always tried. Unfortunately, the Salan slaves, the Africans who blindly follow the imperialists, have tried to discourage us. There is no reason to be demotivated, because history has always proven us right, and history will continue to prove us right. Today, so many things grow on our soil. When we initially announced that we wanted to embark on this agriculture, they thought we were crazy. They said it wouldn't work. Today our cocoa is doing very well. Sunflower is thriving in Burkina, our wheat is doing very well. In short,
these words are not just rhetoric, they are a battle cry for a Burkina Faso that dares to dream of independence, prosperity and dignity. They are the words of a man who knows the weight of history, who understands that the path he treads is fraught with peril, yet refuses to bow. Let's be clear, Captain Ibrahim Traoré is no stranger to danger. Since seizing power in a coup in September 2022, ousting the interim president Paul-Henri Damiba, Traoré has faced a barrage of threats, assassination plots, coup attempts, and now this peculiar protest in France. Posts circulating on X claim he has survived no fewer than 18 assassination attempts in just over 2 years, a figure that, while unverified, speaks to the relentless pressure he endures. These threats come not only from within Burkina Faso, where factions of the military and disgruntled elites chafe at his reforms, but also from external forces, those who feel humiliated by this young leader's audacity to expel foreign troops and demand control over his nation's resources. France, in particular, has been a focal point of Traoré's ire. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has severed military ties with its former colonial power, expelling French troops and diplomats accused of meddling in the country's affairs. In January 2023, crowds in Ouagadougou waved Russian flags and held signs reading, "France's army, get out," a clear signal of the shifting tides in Burkina Faso's geopolitics. The protest in Paris, though small, raises troubling questions. Why would Burkinabe citizens travel thousands of miles to demonstrate in France, a nation that has long been accused of manipulating its former colonies through economic control, military presence and political interference? Traoré himself has been vocal about France's neo-colonial tactics, famously rebuking French President Emmanuel Macron in January 2025 for suggesting that African leaders owed France gratitude for its anti-terrorism efforts. Macron is insulting all Africans, Traoré declared, urging the continent to fight against imperialism and decolonize mentalities. Yet, this group of protesters chose Paris as their stage, calling for Traoré's ouster and the return of a democratic system, a system that, under previous regimes, left Burkina Faso mired in insecurity, poverty and dependence. It's worth noting that Traoré has repeatedly stated that protests are welcome in Burkina Faso, even those against him. So why Paris? Could it be that these voices are amplified by external forces uncomfortable with Traoré's vision of a self-reliant Africa? History whispers a familiar tune here. Lumumba, Sankara, Gaddafi all face similar accusations of tyranny from abroad when they dared to challenge the global order. To understand Traoré's predicament, we must look to the past, for history indeed repeats itself. Burkina Faso's own Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader assassinated in 1987, is Traoré's spiritual predecessor. Like Traoré, Sankara was young, just 33 when he took power in 1983. Like Traoré, he sought to break the chains of neo-colonialism, renaming the country from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, meaning land of upright people. Sankara's policies, land reform, women's rights, education and self-sufficiency, threatened Western interests, particularly France's. His assassination, widely believed to have been orchestrated with foreign complicity, left Burkina Faso vulnerable to decades of exploitation. Traoré, often compared to Sankara, knows this history intimately. In his speeches, he invokes the spirit of his mentor, declaring that Burkina Faso will no longer be a pawn in the games of imperial powers. But unlike Sankara, Traoré has learned to play a different game, one of calculated defiance, strategic alliances, and grassroots support. Traoré's tactics are giving his detractors sleepless nights. Where Sankara's idealism sometimes outpaced his pragmatism, Traoré combines vision with cunning. He has diversified Burkina Faso's partnerships, strengthening ties with Russia, China and Turkey, while rejecting Western dominance. He has expelled French troops and media outlets like France 24, accusing them of bias. He has also cracked down on internal dissent, not through wanton repression, but through a calculated amnesty for past coup plotters, like General Gilbert Diendéré, whose military expertise he seeks to harness against jihadist insurgents. This move, though controversial, shows Traoré's willingness to unite even his adversaries for the greater good of Burkina Faso. And then there's his focus on the people. Unlike many leaders who cling to power for personal gain, Traoré's policies are rooted in tangible progress. He has distributed tractors, tillers and motorcycles to farmers, reducing the cost of fertilizer and ploughing to boost agricultural output. The results speak for themselves. Cocoa, sunflower and wheat production are thriving, defying skeptics who once called his agricultural ambitions crazy. The people of Burkina Faso see this progress, and they have made their voices heard. In May 2024, when Traoré announced a 5-year extension of military rule, citing ongoing insecurity, there were murmurs of discontent. Yet, when rumours surfaced that he might step down, the streets of Ouagadougou erupted with thousands of supporters chanting, "I must stay." This was no staged rally. It was a spontaneous outpouring of loyalty to a leader who, in their eyes, embodies hope. Traoré's popularity stems not from propaganda but from results. New roads, upgraded hospitals, and a gold mine inaugurated in 2023 to process the nation's resources locally, boosting GDP. The Samandani hydroelectric dam, a project long stalled under previous regimes, is now advancing under Traoré's watch, promising energy security and agricultural growth. These are not the actions of a dictator, but of a man determined to drag his nation into the 21st century, kicking and screaming if necessary. So why the protest in France? Why do these 20 to 30 voices choose to align with a narrative that paints Traoré as a villain? Perhaps they are genuine in their desire for democracy, disillusioned by the junta's delay in holding elections. Burkina Faso's transition to civilian rule was initially set for July 2024. But Traoré has pushed it back to 2029, arguing that elections cannot be held while jihadist groups control nearly half the country. Critics accuse him of using insecurity as an excuse to cling to power, a charge that carries weight given the region's history of juntas overstaying their welcome. Yet, Traoré's supporters counter that democracy, as practiced under Western-backed regimes, delivered little but chaos and corruption. No country has developed under democracy, Traoré boldly stated in April 2025, echoing a sentiment shared by many across Africa who see Western models of governance as ill-suited to the continent's realities. Alternatively, the Paris protest could be a symptom of manipulation, a playbook as old as colonialism itself. France's influence in Africa has waned, with Mali, Niger, and Chad also expelling French forces in recent years. The protesters may be unwitting pawns, their grievances amplified by foreign actors eager to destabilize a leader who threatens their interests. After all, how did such a small group secure the means to travel to Paris, a city where visas and logistics are no small feat for ordinary Burkinabe? And why protest there, when Traoré has invited dissent at home? These questions linger, unanswered, casting a shadow over the demonstration's motives. History's echoes are unmistakable. Patrice Lumumba, Congo's fiery independence leader, was toppled and killed in 1961 after refusing to bow to Western demands. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's Pan-Africanist icon, was overthrown in 1966 with CIA backing. Muammar Gaddafi, Libya's controversial strongman, met his end in 2011 amid NATO's intervention. Each time the narrative was the same, a leader branded a dictator, a threat to democracy, when their true crime was daring to prioritize their people over foreign interests. Traoré is walking this same tightrope, but he's no fool. He knows the fate of his predecessors and has adapted accordingly. His alliances with Russia and China provide a counterweight to Western pressure. His amnesty for coup plotters neutralizes internal threats. And his investment in agriculture and infrastructure ensures that the people, his greatest asset, remain by his side. The protesters in France, whether sincere or swayed, miss the bigger picture. Why not march in Paris to demand an end to France's economic stranglehold on Africa, like the CFA franc, that still binds 14 nations to Paris? Why not celebrate Traoré's revolution, cheaper fertilizer, thriving crops, new roads, instead of echoing tired calls for a democracy that has failed Burkina Faso before? The answer lies in mindset. As Traoré said, the silent slaves, the Africans who blindly follow the imperialists, have tried to discourage us. This is the tragedy of our continent. Too often, we internalize the narratives of our oppressors, turning against those who fight for our freedom. Traoré's journey is far from over. The jihadist insurgency, fueled by years of neglect and foreign meddling, remains a formidable challenge. Coup plots continue to simmer, with state media reporting at least 4 thwarted attempts since 2022. And the international community, led by France and its allies, watches closely, ready to pounce on any misstep. Yet, Traoré presses on, undeterred. His agricultural reforms have turned skeptics into believers, with Burkina Faso's wheat fields now yielding harvests once thought impossible. His infrastructure projects, roads, rails, dams, are laying the foundation for a nation that can stand on its own. And his defiance of imperialism has inspired a generation, not just in Burkina Faso, but across Africa, where young people see in him a model of what leadership can be. As Pan-Africanists, we must ask ourselves, what do we want for our continent? A return to the days of puppet regimes, where leaders answered to Paris or Washington while their people starved? Or a future where men like Traoré, flawed but fearless, dare to chart a new course? The protesters in France may call for democracy, but democracy without sovereignty is a hollow promise. Traoré's revolution is not perfect. It is messy, contentious, and fraught with risk. But it is ours, it is African, and it is alive. History may repeat itself, but Traoré is rewriting the ending. Where Sankara fell, Traoré stands. Where Lumumba was silenced, Traoré roars. And where others faltered, Traoré thrives, giving sleepless nights to those who would see him fail. The people of Burkina Faso have spoken. They want him to stay. So let the detractors protest. Let the assassins plot. Let the imperialists scheme. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not just a man. He is a movement. And movements, once ignited, cannot be extinguished. As I finish reporting this, there is something that I need to say, brothers and sisters. Imagine a continent so vast, so rich, so powerful that its leaders no longer tremble at the thought of Western disapproval. Picture a land where the wealth of the soil, the brilliance of its people, and the strength of its unity silence the condescending lectures from foreign capitals. This is the Africa that could have been, one nation, indivisible, standing tall against the storms of external pressure. As a Pan-Africanist, I believe the dream of a united Africa isn't just a romantic ideal. It's the only path to unshackle our leaders from fear, end our reliance on foreign aid, and make the West rethink its arrogance. Today, I report on why African unity could have spared us centuries of exploitation, and why leaders like Captain Ibrahim Traoré are reigniting hope that we can still achieve it. Africa is a paradox. A continent blessed with gold, diamonds, cobalt, oil, fertile lands, and a youthful population brimming with potential. Yet we see our nations begging for loans with humiliating conditions, pleading for food aid while our granaries could feed the world, and watching our leaders tiptoe around Western powers for fear of assassination, coups, or economic strangulation. Why? Because we are divided. 54 nations, each pulling in its own direction, each vulnerable to the whims of external forces. The Organisation of African Unity, OAU, formed in 1963, was meant to change that. Its successor, the African Union, AU, launched in 2002, promised even more, an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa. Yet, here we are, still fragmented, still fearful, still begging. Let's talk about fear first, because it's the chain that binds our leaders. History is littered with examples of what happens when African leaders dare to challenge the West's dominance. Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana's visionary who dreamed of a United States of Africa, was overthrown in a 1966 coup widely believed to have been backed by Western intelligence. Patrice Lumumba, the Congo's fiery independence leader, was assassinated in 1961, his death tied to Belgian and American interests who feared his push for sovereignty over Congo's resources. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary Che Guevara of Africa, was gunned down in 1987, allegedly with foreign complicity, for daring to prioritize self-reliance over Western aid. Even Muammar Gaddafi, flawed as he was, faced NATO's wrath in 2011 after championing African unity and proposing a single currency to rival the dollar and euro. The message was clear: step out of line and you're gone. This fear isn't just about physical harm, it's economic too. African leaders know that defying the West risks sanctions, frozen assets, or being cut off from International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank loans. In 2022, Africa's total public debt reached $1.8 trillion, according to the UN's Trade and Development Agency. That's 40 times Nigeria's annual budget, the continent's largest economy. Countries like Zambia and Ghana have defaulted on debts, forced to grovel for bailouts with strings attached, privatize your industries, cut social spending, open your markets to Western corporations. If you resist, aid dries up, trade deals vanish, and your economy suffocates. So, leaders comply, heads bowed, because they govern small, isolated nations too weak to stand alone. Now, imagine if Africa were one nation. Picture a united Africa with a population of 1.4 billion, a combined GDP of $3.1 trillion, 8th largest globally per 2023 estimates, and control over 30% of the world's mineral reserves. Cobalt for batteries, lithium for tech, oil for energy. A single African government could negotiate as an equal with the US, China, or Europe. No leader would fear assassination or sanctions because the collective might of the continent would deter any aggressor. The West's divide and rule tactics, pitting Nigeria against Kenya, Ethiopia against Sudan, would collapse. A united Africa could say, "We don't need your loans, we'll fund our own development." No more begging for crumbs while our resources build skyscrapers in London and New York. Economic integration is the key that unlocks this vision. The African Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, launched in 2021, is a step toward it, aiming to create a single market for 1.3 billion people. The AU estimates AFCFTA could lift 30 million people out of poverty and boost intra-African trade by 60% by 2030. Right now, only 15% of Africa's trade is with itself. Compare that to Europe's 68% or North America's 37%. If Kenya needs manganese, why import from Australia when Burkina Faso has it? If Burkina Faso needs tech expertise, why look to Silicon Valley when Nairobi's Silicon Savannah is thriving? A united Africa could trade internally, share resources, and build industries without fear of Western retaliation. If one nation faces sanctions, the others would rally, supplying food, funds, or markets to keep it afloat. No leader would feel isolated, no country left to fend for itself. This is why the West fears African unity. A fragmented Africa is easy to exploit. Colonial powers drew arbitrary borders at the 1884 Berlin Conference to ensure we'd stay divided. Hausa split between Nigeria and Niger, Somali across 4 countries, Iwe between Ghana and Togo. Those lines still haunt us, fueling conflicts and weakening our bargaining power. A united Africa would end that game. It would control its own destiny, set its own prices for cobalt and oil, and demand respect at global tables. The West knows this. That's why every push for unity, and Nkrumah's, Gaddafi's, Sankara's, has been met with sabotage. They don't want an Africa that can say no and mean it. A new generation of leaders is stepping up, unafraid and unapologetic. At the forefront is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso's 37-year-old president, who seized power in a 2022 coup and has since become a beacon for Pan-Africanists. Traoré doesn't mince words. He's called out Western hypocrisy. He's pushing for self-reliance, reviving local industries, boosting agriculture and trading with neighbours like Mali and Niger. Traoré's boldness is infectious. In Kenya, youth-led protests in 2024 forced the government to scrap a finance bill tied to IMF demands, showing a generation unwilling to accept business as usual. In Nigeria, activists are demanding resource control, tired of oil wealth enriching foreign companies while locals starve. Across the continent, young people, 70% of Africa's population is under 30, are chanting Africa for Africans, echoing the dreams of Nkrumah and Sankara. They see leaders like Traoré not as outliers but as the future,